Ben Litchfield is the Democratic candidate, one of two Democrats running in a June 20th primary for the Virginia Senate District 27 seat, which encompasses portions of Stafford County, Spotsylvania County, and Fredericksburg City. Ben's coming on to talk to us about his campaign. Ben, thank you very much for your time today.
Well, thank you, Uriah. I appreciate it. And I'm a subscriber to Potomac Local, and I love everything you do, keeping the big boys honest and being that fourth pillar. So thank you.
Well, thank you, sir. Flattery will get you everywhere, of course. And I wanted to start by asking you about yourself, your background, both as a resident, now as a political campaign, a candidate, I should say, your family background. Tell us more about yourself.
Sure. So my wife and I moved to Stafford County in 2014, 2015. We had spent some time in Northern Virginia, living in Fairfax and Falls Church, and wanted to kind of escape the traffic and live more of the suburban lifestyle, start a family, those sorts of things. So we've been in Stafford for about 8 years now. My background, I was the chairman of the Stafford County Democratic Committee for about 4 years during 2017 to 2021. And my professional background, I'm a consumer protection attorney. I've spent probably the last decade or so working in government at some of the highest levels. I was at the National Credit Union Administration writing rules and regulations around payday lending, credit union mergers, and making credit more affordable for folks, advised Congress on technical pieces of banking legislation. And from there, went on to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau and worked to oversee the agency's mortgage, student loan, credit card, and auto portfolios, setting national supervision strategy. And what that really means is that I was working very closely with agency examiners to go after companies that would prey upon our disabled veterans, for example, or our teachers with abusive short dollar lending or payday loans, or vehicle title companies that had abusive repossession practices, like literally repossessing the car as you have a single mom trying to put her baby in the car seat to go to work. I grew up pretty blue collar. My mom and dad were both, my father was an auto mechanic, built trains, did odd jobs. My mom worked in a factory. They split up when I was relatively young. I was raised by my mom in a trailer park in Western Massachusetts. So we had a pretty hard scrabble upbringing. My sister and I, we had to sort of got a front row seat to how these social programs, the social safety net is broken and it doesn't work for working families. I remember my mom on the phone with the governor of Massachusetts, where I'm from, begging to get health care for my sister and me. And so those struggles were very much at the forefront of my mind going as a young adult into college, where I went to school in DC at GW, and then going into law school at Howard. And I think it set a trajectory for me, growing up this way, to go into consumer finance, go into consumer protection, and try to even the scales a little bit. And I think you can see that in some of the positions I've taken and some of the stances. I'm very pro little guy, whatever that means. My anti-monopoly work, my consumer protection work, the trend is trying to make things fairer for working folks. And so that's a little bit about me. And as we mentioned, I'm expecting a daughter in September, so I'm excited to be a dad. We're just
Congratulations on that. That's fantastic news. Are you married?
I am. I'm married. My wife Valerie and I have been married for quite some time. We were married in 2015, and so we very, very, very happily married.
Congratulations.
Thank
Congratulations. And
you.
how old are you?
I am 36, which is kind
Fantastic.
of young for a politician, but I think it gives me a perspective that's different. I actually think I might be the youngest candidate of all of them. I think Matt is just a few years older than me. And
Yeah, I
then,
think Matt's 38, 39. Yeah. Yeah. I talked to him on Monday, so that's why that's fresh in my head. I don't memorize all of your ages. I'm not that good, trust me. Um, let me start with school choice. There's been a lot of talk about school choice. The governor, when he came in on the campaign trail, and of course after he was elected, talked a lot about school choice and has put money toward lab schools. There are those who say that there is no chance that a school could compete with another public school within the same public school division. It's just not fair. That's not the way that the system should work. However, there are parents who say, well, I fund the bills, I pay for the schools, so I think my money should go to follow my kid to go whichever school I think they should go to. So where do you stand on school choice?
Sure. So I want to be clear at the outset. I'm a huge supporter of our public schools. I think we have fantastic public schools in Virginia. I sympathize with parents who are making these tough choices. I know during the pandemic, I had an issue with the schooling my nephew was receiving. He lives in Spotsylvania, and so it's challenging. You see a school that, as a parent, you think is underperforming, and you want your child to go to another school that um, maybe performing a little bit better. I think that one of the problems with that is that you see a disinvestment in these public schools that may not be performing up to standards. And really what I think we should be doing is putting more money into them, looking at why they're not performing, and really investing heavily in them. I think every public school should be just as good as the next one. And so I look at school choice a little bit differently. I see an underperforming school, and I think that is a policy failure. We need to do what we can to make sure that that school has the same resources to compete with any other school. I was just having a conversation at the hairdressers yesterday where one of the hairdressers was talking about how one high school in Stafford is deemed the good school because that's where all the wealthy folks are and they get all the money. And another high school in Stafford is deemed not so great. And, quite frankly, the not so great high school is the one my daughter is going to be going to. So I would be much more supportive of making sure that that high school has the resources it needs, because those families, they deserve a quality education too. Their kids have a right to attend a school that provides them the same opportunity as the good school. And so,
Well, let's talk briefly about how we
yeah,
would do that, because under the
yeah,
school choice model, they almost come at it like a business, right? If this business produces a great product, then more people will choose this business A over business B, which will then force business B to try to retool, try to look at their product and how can we improve our product to get more of businesses A's people to come and shop with business B. And on top of with the competition issue, we're also faced with a funding issue in Stafford County. We saw a big budget battle this year between the schools and the board of supervisors. The schools, despite the fact the board of supervisors raised the tax rate and gave the largest allocation in county history to the school division, about $16 million, it was still far short than what the school division said that it needed to keep its lights on. So how do we get those underperforming schools to become more like the quote unquote rich school, as you put it, the good school? How do we do that while funding those schools in ways that people can afford to do so in these areas? Because frankly, a lot of people move here because it is cheaper than living closer to Washington, D.C. So they come further out and about 40, 45, 50 miles out from the city center to live cheaper. How do we
yeah.
fund schools and fix those policy issues?
Well, I mean, I certainly made that choice myself, so I'm sympathetic to it. I think that the business model way of looking at it is a little bit wrong-headed, because unlike a traditional business where you can shop with your feet, you can't exactly change your geography. You can't move from Falmouth to Garrisonville and vice versa. I mean, theoretically you could, but most working families can't. For they're they are where they are, and the schools that are in that area are the ones that they typically send their children to. And I don't think that many working families have the resources to try and shop around and pick what school is best for them. Some do, but I think that for a lot of folks, if they're working one, two jobs, second shift, third shift, it's a lot of burden to place on the parent. And I think really the role of government here is to make sure that every school gets the resources that it needs to be successful. And I think that we can do that by getting more funding from Richmond for our schools. We need more teachers. Obviously, I've been talking to some of the supervisors in Stafford about adjusting cost to compete so that we can get more money for teacher salaries, for paraprofessionals. And we need to elect school board members who are really committed to making sure that funding is adequate for all of our schools and that it's fair and equitable. I think that sometimes what we see with politicians across the board is that they're happy to get their little slice of the pie, but they don't really think about the county as a whole. And I mean, part of that is natural, right? You have voter base and you want to make them happy, but on these big things about where the funding is going in our schools and how we structure this, we really need some better angels, I think, at the local level.
No, let me get your take on this, because this is
Sure.
something I was thinking about during the budget season. You know, is I know in Prince William County that the school board has not always been elected. Up until 1995, they were appointed by members of the Board of County Supervisors. And so, and you bring up a point about how some school board members think only about the district in which they serve. So, do you think the community would better be served by a board that is not elected, but maybe appointed by a member of the board of county supervisors, so they could work better in concert with the board of supervisors, which in fact is the funding mechanism for the school division? And do you think that maybe the members should serve at large, representing the entire county versus a specific magisterial district? I mean, are those ideas that are just way out there, or do you think that that's something the General Assembly might take up?
You know, I'm a big D Democrat, obviously, but I'm also a little D Democrat, and I'm skeptical about having the Board of County Supervisors appoint school board members for the same reason that I would be skeptical of having a transportation authority with political appointees or any body that has folks on it with significant lawmaking power that are not directly accountable to the people. So I'm loath to adopt an appointment system because I just think that I believe in democracy and I think that we should elect our representatives, especially if we're giving them that kind of significant power. You know, you bring up a good point about school board members running at large, and I think that that is an interesting idea, really. Having at-large school board members, because really the school system isn't, Garrisonville. It isn't Falmouth. It's not Aquia. It is the Stafford County public school system. And so we do need regional representation. Don't get me wrong. I think we need representation from Garrisonville, from Falmouth, from Aquia, from Hartwood, from George Washington. But this idea that school board members are supposed to serve everyone, really, it appeals to me. It's something that I would think about it. There are pros and cons. I'm not exactly sold on the idea, but I like the idea of working more for the good of the community instead of for your own regional issues. Because we've seen this in school redistricting fights. I know there was a lot of drama around what was going on with New and Old Moncure. There's a lot of strife that goes on, and there's a lot of horse trading. And so I think that having a broader, more county focused perspective could have benefits, but it also could have drawbacks.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah,
and
and
I
there is that covering local schools for so many years. I can tell you there's a lot of I got to win for my district, I got to win for my school, I got to win for my kids, and it's very insular versus as you were saying, looking at the broader perspective, which is how do we best serve the entire the school district. So let me switch gears now and talk to you about really quickly two of the controversial issues that we've seen. I've asked other candidates about, so I'll ask you about as well. One of those, CRT in the schools, social emotional learning. Do you believe that it is in the school division? What do you make of it? Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Would you root it out, as some candidates have said? And I'll let you answer that question.
Sure. So I think we need to start by being very clear that CRT is not taught in our schools. This is an advanced topic that I learned in law school at Howard. What I do think that we should be learning is true history. I think it would be a very sad state of affairs if our students didn't learn about Dr. King, about Rosa Parks, about the civil rights movement, because that's part of the fabric that makes America such a great country, is that we can express civil discontent, that we can fight for civil rights through these mechanisms, and that we're always working for a more perfect union. I think it's part of the great story of our nation. And so it would be very sad that if we didn't study these things, it would be very sad if we didn't study the Civil War. It's all part of who we are. And I don't think that anything about that is teaching our children to hate America, for example. I push back pretty forcefully on this idea that by learning about the civil rights movement, we're going to somehow teach our kids not to
Do you,
love the country.
yeah. Do you have I mean, do you know where that's happening, where teachers are saying we're not going to teach about the civil rights movement, or we're not going to teach about the Civil War? Do you, when you say true history, do you know of a place where true history is not being taught?
I haven't seen it myself, but I was deeply concerned with some of the history SOL revisions that we saw. There was huge pushback from the Virginia NAACP. There was discussion about how some of these standards weren't age appropriate, how certain things were left out, teaching about Indigenous people, for example. And I think we just need to be very careful about this on both sides. We need to be very careful about making sure that we're not indoctrinating students, but that we're teaching them historically accurate facts about our nation. So I think the CR, like, just to reiterate, CRT is not taught in our schools. I don't think it's age appropriate to bring it up. Social emotional learning, I I really don't have a problem with it. My nephew has mindfulness classes. It teaches him to make friends. He has autism, and this has been really helpful for him to make friends, to be mindful about his personal space and about his relationship with others. I don't really have a problem with it. I don't see the cause for upset. And so I'm happy to have conversations with the parents who are concerned about it, though, because we need to put parents first and we need to make sure that they're heard. So if they are concerned, I'm definitely happy to have those conversations. I just personally, I don't have concerns about it.
The last sort of hot button issue I'll ask you about, and we've seen this in the national headlines with Target and Bud Light, and then here locally in Manassas, we reported there was a parent group that protested a drag show during a Pride festival that occurred last month, late May. The drag show took place in public at the Harris Pavilion, center of town square. One of the Matt Strickland, who's running for the GOP nomination for the Republicans for your 27th district, said that he would introduce legislation to ban public drag show performances, saying that he'd be okay with it. If you want to do it in your own home or in a private business behind closed doors, that's fine. But he would not. He'd introduce legislation to ban it in public. Where do you come down on these public drag shows in happening in the communities?
So my understanding is what I've seen from the courts is that the federal courts to tackle these issues, I think in Tennessee and other states, have said that this is protected First Amendment activity. And so I have no interest in violating the First Amendment rights of individuals. Um, just like I would not vote to ban drag shows, I wouldn't vote to ban Trump rallies. I think that people have a constitutional right to express themselves. There is a line. Obviously, we're not allowing pornographic or obscene content to happen in public in the view of children. But from what I understand, most of these laws are constitutionally overbroad. They violate the First Amendment, and I'm just not interested in introducing unconstitutional legislation. I cannot tell you how many oaths I took to uphold the Constitution, how many hours I spent studying it in law school and for the bar and in my time in federal government. I don't feel like trampling on the First Amendment rights of Virginians. I think that we've got too much pressing economically that we need to focus on the real issues.
I want to ask you about law enforcement because
Sure.
here locally and law enforcement, police departments and sheriff's offices across the country, we're hearing that it has never been a more difficult time to be a local police officer since the death of George Floyd in 2020. Locally, we've seen departments such as Stafford and Prince William County raise their starting salaries for incoming deputies and new police officers. Stafford went to about $59,000. Prince William up from to 63, I believe, and then up from 52. So they're trying to recruit and retain by offering more pay, but we have certainly continued to see the challenges for law enforcement. So if you're elected to the Senate, what will you do to make sure that the law enforcement officers who want to serve are able to do so to protect the community?
Sure. I agree that we are facing a real challenging time for our law enforcement. We're asking them to do more and more. And we're putting a lot of stress on them. And it's a very stressful time to be in law enforcement. I think that there are a lot of things that we can do to make their jobs easier. Some of the and this is actually part and parcel with what criminal justice reform advocates are saying. We can implement and fund the David Peters alert so that we have mental health professionals responding to mental health incidents instead of law enforcement. We can have conversations around policing in schools. I really think that we should not be asking our law enforcement officers to serve as a backstop for discipline in our public schools. Now, there is a role for SROs, and I think that SROs keep us safe, as we've seen in Spotsylvania. But what I am concerned about is this idea that, all right, there's an SRO in the school, so discipline issues go to the SRO instead of having school officials handle it. And so I obviously think our law enforcement need to be compensated competitively. I think that we need to provide them with any mental health treatment that they need. I was just to give you a story about that. There was an individual who was shot by law enforcement in Stafford County almost a year ago, and I was having a conversation with Sheriff Decatur about that, and his officers were really shaken up about it. They didn't want to make that decision to shoot that individual, but I believe that person was brandishing a weapon in the middle of traffic and posed a danger. Those officers are going to have to carry that for the rest of their lives. We need to make sure that they have access to mental health treatment if they need it and if they want it, and that we destigmatize seeking mental health help for officers because they are our first line of defense. They are keeping our community safe, and they see some things that the rest of us don't. And they're in this so that we don't have to see it. So I support them in what they need. I stand with them. Obviously, I also think that standing with law enforcement means supporting criminal justice reform where necessary because we are asking our law enforcement to do too much. We need them. Go ahead.
The last question I'll ask you is about the brick wall. The Democrats, led by Senator Louise Lucas, and propped up by others like Senator Jerry McPike, who is running, and now Delegate Elizabeth Guzman, who's also running for Senate. They have vowed to keep up the brick wall that Democrats have erected in Richmond, as they say, to push back against Governor Glenn Youngkin. Would you be another brick in that wall if you are elected to represent the 27th? Do you vow to keep up that brick wall between the governor and what Democrats say is what the blue Virginia, which Virginia is a blue state, what the residents of Virginia want?
You know, I think the voters in this district and the voters around Virginia want to send us to Richmond to get things done. Gridlock is never popular, and I would work with the governor where appropriate to advance the interests of this district. One big thing that I really want to work with him on is making us more competitive for small businesses. I have a number of friends who work in the employee ownership space, and I want to see us establish an employee ownership center like North Carolina and Missouri and Kansas. I think we can do great work there. And so, as far as the blue brick wall goes, I think there are Democratic priorities like reproductive freedom that I would defend, but we've got to get stuff done. Like nobody elects us to go sit there and oppose everything and to just do nothing. That breeds distrust in government. It's sort of the nonsense we're seeing in Washington. I don't think they want to send us to Richmond to do that. The folks in Senate District 27 will be sending someone to Richmond to get things done. And where appropriate, I will work with the governor on that.
Ben Litchfield is the Democrat running, and one of two Democrats in a June 20th primary election for the 27th Virginia Senate District seat. Ben, thank you for coming on and talking with us about your campaign today.
Thanks, Uriah.